The first light of April 7, 1945, touched the steel-gray waters of Tokyo Bay. The night's mist still clung to the horizon as a faint hum echoed across the eastern sky. The synchronized drone of nearly 100 North American P-51 Mustangs cutting through the dawn. From the cockpits, the world looked calm, deceptive, almost holy. Below, the sacred mountain Mount Fuji rose like a white sentinel above the Japanese homeland. For Major James B. Tapp, gripping the control stick of his Mustang, this was not just another mission. It was history in motion. The 15th and 21st Fighter Groups had launched from Iwo Jima, flying over 750 miles of open ocean, a feat that American planners had once called impossible. Each pilot knew the stakes. This was the first very long-range VLR fighter escort mission over the Japanese home islands. Their task: protect 103 B-29 superfortresses on a daylight strike against Tokyo. The mere thought of single-engine fighters over Japan defied every previous law of air warfare. Below them, Japan was just beginning to awaken. Fishermen pushed their boats into the bay, farmers tended rice paddies glistening with dew, and anti-aircraft crews blinked at the horizon, unaware that within minutes, American fighters would darken their skies. The sun, emblem of the empire, rose over a nation unprepared for what was coming, the moment when distance would no longer protect them. The Packard V1650-7 Merlin engine beneath each Mustang's cowl roared like a symphony of precision engineering, 1,695 horsepower, two-stage supercharger, liquid-cooled perfection. Born from British genius and American industry, the Merlin transformed the P-51 from a capable escort into a world-striding legend. At 25,000 feet, where Japanese engines gasped for air, the Mustangs thrived, sleek, unyielding, the product of mass production and meticulous design. Each Mustang carried 6.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, synchronized into a single devastating chorus. Firing at 800 rounds per minute, they could unleash 80 bullets per second, armor-piercing, incendiary, designed to tear through aluminum and ignite the skies. The mathematics of death had never been so refined. Major Tapp's finger rested lightly on the trigger, aware that somewhere ahead, Japanese pilots were scrambling, unaware that their world was about to change forever. At 0700 hours, radar operators near Tokyo detected something unimaginable: enemy fighters over the Japanese mainland. The alarms screamed across airfields from Chiba to Yokohama. Pilots rushed to their aircraft, Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate, Ki-61 Hien, Ki-43 Hayabusa, even aging Zeros. The air trembled as over 100 interceptors clawed for altitude. Yet nothing could prepare them for the sight that met their eyes: sleek, silver-winged Mustangs glinting above Mount Fuji, flying in perfect formation as if the Pacific Ocean no longer existed. Flight Sergeant Tota Nimizu, flying a Ki-84 Hayate, would later recall his disbelief. "We thought they were bombers at first. When I saw their silhouettes, those wings, that shape, I realized they were fighters. Impossible. Our commanders said no American fighter could reach Tokyo. Yet there they were." For him, that moment was the day Japan lost the sky. The first clash came at 25,000 feet, where thin air favored machines of superior design. Major Tapp rolled into a dive, the Mustang screaming downward at nearly 500 miles per hour, guns blazing. Tracers stitched across the sky, slicing through a formation of Ki-43s. One burst struck home. A Japanese fighter erupted in flame, spinning earthward. Tapp pulled up hard, the Merlin engine howling, G-forces crushing him into the seat. Above, the battle spread like wildfire. Japanese tactics, the famed three-plane Shotai formation, now seemed archaic against disciplined American teamwork. The Mustangs operated in finger-four formations, flexible and lethal. Communication crackled through clear VHF radios. "Break left, red 2, someone shouted. "Bandits high 1 o'clock. The sky became a swirling ballet of contrails, tracers, and shattered dreams. By the time the B-29s arrived, the sky was already under American control. From their bomber windows, crews watched the dogfights unfold like some terrible choreography. Flames, smoke, the sharp glitter of sunlight off aluminum wings, all proof that the impossible had become routine. Japan's capital lay defenseless beneath them, and the day's raid would mark more than destruction. It marked the death of Japanese air power. Beneath the polished cowling of every P-51D Mustang, the Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin V1650-7 purred like a mechanical heart forged from precision and purpose. Its dual-stage supercharger gulped the thin air at altitude and turned it into raw power, delivering nearly 1,700 horsepower where most engines gasped. The engine's smooth metallic note was a hymn to industrial perfection. Mass-produced, identical, flawless. Every bolt, every hose, every bearing fit exactly as it should. In contrast, Japan's best fighter, the Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate, hit an unreliable heart. The Ha-45 Hamar Radial, temperamental and starved by poor fuel and rough steel. American factories in California and Texas produced Mustangs like clockwork, one every hour. Thousands of women and men worked under floodlights, rivet guns hammering rhythmically through the night. Standardization was religion. Parts from Dallas fit perfectly into airframes from Inglewood. The result was a weapon system that could be maintained anywhere in the world, even on a remote volcanic island. Each aircraft was born identical. Each pilot stepped into a familiar world of gauges, switches, and reliability. Across the Pacific, Japanese workers labored in shattered factories lit by oil lamps. Bomb damage exposed roofs to the night sky. Precision tools lay buried under dust. Quality control collapsed. Steel warped, rivets misaligned, engines coughed themselves to death after only hours of flight. The Hamar engine, once promising, had become a mechanical lottery. Pilots never knew if their engine would start, climb, or explode. Some airframes left assembly lines with mismatched parts, others with untreated metal that rusted before leaving the hangar. The Empire was fighting a modern war with medieval tools. By early 1945, Japan's industrial map looked like a patchwork of wreckage. B-29 firebombing had erased entire cities, Nagoya, Kobe, Tokyo itself. Every raid consumed not only factories but the nation's capacity to resist. Yet from the ruins, new Ki-84s still emerged, painted hastily, flown by pilots barely trained to land them. They took off from airfields pockmarked with craters, engines sputtering, landing gear trembling from brittle steel. For every dozen built, only a handful were truly airworthy. The contrast extended beyond machines, it defined entire civilizations. The United States fought with logistics. Japan fought with spirit. America's lifeline stretched unbroken from Detroit to Iwo Jima. Liberty ships unloading crates of ammunition, drums of 100-octane fuel, spare propellers, canned food, letters from home. Every Mustang that lifted into the sky carried the weight of an empire of factories, refineries, and supply ships. Japan's supply lines, strangled by submarine warfare, brought only scarcity. Fuel brewed from pine roots, oil pressed from vegetables, desperation turned to chemistry. Major Tapp and his squadron felt that abundance in every detail. Their Mustangs started on the first push of a button. Instruments glowed steady. Oxygen systems worked flawlessly at 30,000 feet. In their survival kits lay chocolate, morphine, signal flares, luxuries by enemy standards. For Japanese pilots, even parachutes were in short supply. Many flew without them. The disparity wasn't courage, it was arithmetic. A nation of machines versus a nation of exhaustion. Fuel defined the limits of war. A Mustang drank 100-octane gasoline refined in American plants. Its Merlin sang clean and strong. The Hayate was lucky to receive 87 octane, sometimes even less, thick and smoky, mixed with alcohol or pine oil. Engines detonated, pistons cracked, power vanished. In the chaos of dwindling supply, Japan's best pilots became test subjects for failing machinery. Every sortie risked mechanical suicide before the enemy ever appeared. The Merlin engine's song echoed over Tokyo that April morning. A sound so alien it seemed supernatural. Japanese civilians looked up from the streets, shielding their eyes, watching contrails arc across the perfect sky. They had heard bombers before, but never fighters, never the swift, low growl of machines that shouldn't exist above their own capital. The illusion of invulnerability, the myth of the divine wind, began to fracture. For Major Tapp, the mission was more than combat. It was vindication, proof that technology could overcome geography itself. His instruments hummed, the horizon curved in faint blue haze, and far below, Japan's cities lay exposed. The Mustangs were the spear point of industrial civilization, crossing oceans that once defined the limits of empire. Every revolution of the propeller whispered the same truth. Distance was dead. The first bursts of tracer fire streaked across the clear sky like shooting stars in daylight. The Mustangs had met the Ki-84 Hayates head-on, and for the first time, the skies over Japan became a true battlefield. Major James B. Tapp rolled his Mustang inverted, pulled into a diving attack, and opened fire. The 6 Brownings spat fire, 80 rounds per second, a glowing river of death. His tracers tore through a Japanese fighter's fuselage, which burst into orange flame, spiraling toward the farmland below. Below, Tokyo's suburbs blurred past. Rice paddies, wooden rooftops, temple courtyards flashing beneath the wings of both nations' finest. Japanese pilots fought bravely, but coordination crumbled. The famed 3-plane Shotai formation had become obsolete in the face of the American Finger 4, flexible, lethal, and precise. Over radio channels, American voices were calm and crisp. Bandits high 11 o'clock. Brake left, red 2. Every Mustang moved like a limb of one vast mechanical organism. The Japanese fighters clawed for height, but their single-stage superchargers faltered above 20,000 feet. Engines sputtered, leaving black smoke trails in thin air. The Mustangs, their Merlins roaring clean and cold, climbed effortlessly into the sun. At these altitudes, war became a dance of endurance. Pilots blacked out under G-force, blood forced from their heads, vision tunneling into gray. Those who survived did so by instinct. For the Japanese, even radio silence was an enemy. Many aircraft flew without working transmitters. Pilots signaled by rocking their wings, by hand gestures, by instinct. Without coordination, squadrons dissolved into chaos. One pilot dove too steeply, another stalled mid-turn. The sky filled with debris and contrails that twisted like ghosts above the Empire's capital. Below, the B-29s arrived, 103 silver giants, their bomb bays yawning open like steel mouths. The Mustangs dove between them, intercepting attackers before they reached the formation. Bombs fell in long glittering lines, each a falling sun. From above, the pilots saw Tokyo ignite, white plumes rising where factories once stood. The air shimmered with heat and death. Flight Sergeant Todanimizu, in his Hayate, tried to climb through the swarm. His aircraft shuddered, oil pressure dropping, engine coughing. He saw silver flashes above, too fast to track. In his post-war diary, he would write, "I felt as if they were gods, not men. Their engines never failed. Their formations never broke. I understood then that courage alone could not win this war." Major Tapp's squadron scored 26 kills that day. 2 Mustangs were lost. The ratio 13-1 spoke louder than any speech. In later missions, it would rise even higher. 20-1, 30-1. The battle had ceased to be a contest. It had become an equation, technology, training, and industry multiplied by discipline. For Japan, every new mission was a sacrifice to inevitability. By May, Tokyo's sky was no longer a battlefield. It was American airspace. The VLR Mustangs patrolled freely, strafing airfields, trains, and shipping. The divine wind, once mythic, once unstoppable, had been silenced by steel and superchargers. Japanese civilians no longer looked up in awe. They looked up in dread, knowing what the gleam of silver wings meant. Meanwhile, on Iwo Jima, mechanics worked tirelessly beneath the volcanic sun. Engines were overhauled in hours, bullet holes patched overnight. The black sand stained everything, but spirits remained high. Each returning pilot was met with handshakes, jokes, and new ammunition belts. The rhythm of American logistics was as relentless as its aircraft. a machine that never stopped moving. For the Japanese pilots who survived, the aftermath was quieter. Ruined airfields, empty fuel drums, and the hollow sound of engines that would never start again. They stared into the distance where the contrails faded, realizing the truth they had been forbidden to speak. Japan no longer owned its sky. By June 1945, Japan's sky had become a graveyard. The airfields once bustling with aircraft now stood silent, their runways cracked and pitted by bomb craters. Rows of Ki-84 Hayates, Ki-61 Hents, and old Zeros sat in the sun, their wings stripped for parts, their engines cold. Mechanics scavenged what they could, a working magneto here, a functional tire there, anything to keep a handful of fighters airworthy. But every morning, the same truth stared them in the face. There was no fuel, no pilots, and no hope. The fuel crisis was catastrophic. Once mighty refineries at Yokkaichi and Fukuoka lay in ruins. Japan's oil reserves were gone, its tankers sunk. Desperate chemists brewed substitutes from pine roots and sweet potatoes, producing thick, smoky fuel that destroyed engines faster than enemy bullets. Each gallon cost hundreds of man-hours, a grotesque inversion of industrial logic. Meanwhile, the Americans shipped millions of gallons of 100-octane gasoline across the Pacific as easily as mail. For every Japanese gallon, America burned 1,000. Pilots trained on the fumes of imagination. Where once they had flown hours each day, now they practiced on bicycles, simulating turns and climbs with empty hands. Their instructors, veterans of China, New Guinea, the Philippines, were dead or grounded. Teenagers barely 18 strapped into machines they could hardly control. The Empire's air arm, once the terror of Asia, had become a tragic parody of its former self. The Americans, by contrast, had turned flying into science. Every Mustang pilot from Iwo Jima was trained for the VLR missions, 8-hour endurance flights over open ocean. Their maps were precise, compasses calibrated, oxygen systems tested. They carried survival kits with radios, rafts, and morphine. Even their rescue submarines, nicknamed Lifeguard League, waited beneath the sea, ready to pluck down pilots from the waves. It was warfare elevated to a system, nothing left to chance, everything repeatable. The Japanese had no such safety net. If a pilot's engine failed over water, he was gone. The Imperial Command called it honor in sacrifice. Pilots called it what it was, death without purpose. The Pacific swallowed hundreds of men whose names were never recorded. In diaries found after the war, many wrote the same final line, "Tell my mother I flew for the Emperor." American logistics became unstoppable momentum. At Iwo Jima, 3 fighter groups operated in rotation, launching missions daily. 57,000 gallons of fuel consumed each day. 230,000 rounds of ammunition expended per sortie cycle. Every bullet, every drop accounted for and replenished by an invisible chain stretching back across the Pacific. Factories in Detroit, refineries in Texas, ammunition plants in Missouri. This was not just air power, it was industrial gravity, pulling Japan toward inevitable defeat. The Mustangs flew not only to fight but to prove a principle, that modern warfare was no longer about territory or honor, but about capacity. Each mission over Japan demonstrated the mathematics of empire. Superior production times superior logistics equals victory. Japan's courage could not multiply. Its factories could not replicate. Its pilots could not be reborn fast enough. When the weather turned violent on June 1, 1945, even nature seemed to test the limits of the Mustang. On that day, later called Black Friday, 27 aircraft vanished into storm clouds off Osaka. Pilots became disoriented, compasses spun, artificial horizons failed. Lightning illuminated wings coated in ice. The storm consumed 24 aircraft without a single shot fired. For the survivors, it was a reminder. Even steel and science bowed before the sky's wrath. Major James B. Tapp, writing after the war, reflected, "Battling Japanese fighters got your blood up, but fighting the Pacific itself, that was different. The sea was endless, hypnotic. Every minute you asked yourself if you'd ever see land again." Pilots endured 8-hour missions in cockpits the size of coffins. Their legs cramped, their bodies numb, their minds strained between monotony and terror. They flew suspended between two infinities, the ocean below and the void above. Back in Japan, the psychological collapse deepened. Civilians watched American fighters circle overhead with impunity. Children pointed to the sky where silver contrails drew vast crosses. Propaganda could no longer hide the truth. If American fighters could appear above the imperial palace, then the war was lost. Even the emperor's divine aura could not command the wind anymore. Captain Yoshio Yoshida of the 47th Sentai wrote in his journal, "The sight of Mustangs over Tokyo was the moment my soul broke. We had believed our homeland untouchable. Now the enemy's fighters danced above our sacred city as if we no longer existed." His words captured the essence of defeat. Not the fall of cities or armies, but the realization that the heavens themselves had been conquered. For the American pilots, the war had transformed from peril to pattern. They owned the air. They flew not to survive, but to demonstrate dominance. Tokyo, once a mythic fortress, was now a coordinate on a map. The Pacific no longer divided the world. It connected it, bridged by wings and engines. Humanity had outgrown geography. By August 1945, the air war over Japan was no longer a contest. It was ritual. The P-51D Mustangs took off from Iwo Jima daily, escorting bombers or strafing what little remained of Japan's defenses. The missions became clockwork. Briefings at dawn, takeoff into a rising sun, long flights through calm skies. The Japanese once called their homeland the Empire of Heaven. Now, even heaven belonged to someone else. The 47th, 244th, and 56th Sentai, once elite Japanese air units, were shadows of themselves. Pilots were now teenagers, their eyes bright but empty, their hearts already surrendered. They took off with half-filled tanks, some with only a few rounds of ammunition. Each mission was a farewell, the Empire's last whisper into the sky. When the Mustangs appeared above Tokyo, most did not climb to meet them. They simply watched. On August 10, 1945, the final air battles of the war were fought. The 15th and 21st Fighter Groups swept across Honshu, claiming 7 kills, one of the last engagements in aviation's deadliest conflict. Their radios were calm, their formation perfect. Below them, the flames of war were dying out, and Japan's fate was already sealed. The Mustangs returned to base, unaware that the world they had known was ending. 5 days later, on August 15th, the Emperor's voice echoed across Japan for the first time. His surrender speech, quiet, trembling, told his people that the divine wind had failed. In the streets, civilians knelt in silence. In hangars, mechanics stopped working. On airfields, pilots laid down their flight helmets like offerings to an old god who had finally turned away. The age of the samurai sky was over. The last Mustang to see combat in World War II was flown by Lieutenant Jerry Yellin, a veteran of the 78th Fighter Squadron. On August 14th, August 15th in Japan, he led his wingman, 2nd Lieutenant Philip Schlamberg, on a strafing mission over Nagoya. They did not know that Japan had surrendered. The recall code word Utah never reached their radios. They dived through anti-aircraft fire, completed their run, and turned for home. When Yellin emerged from a cloud bank, Schlamberg was gone. He would become the last American combat death of World War II. For Yellin, the moment was frozen in memory. The war was over, but we didn't know. Phil died on the last day, hours after peace had been declared. That's how thin the line was between life and history. His words captured the essence of every pilot's experience. A lifetime lived between missions, between horizons, between seconds. When Japan surrendered, the Mustangs did not celebrate. They simply stopped flying. Their engines cooled on the tarmac, the smell of oil and metal hanging in the still air. Some pilots walked alone to the beach at Iwo Jima, staring at the same ocean they had once feared to cross. The silence that followed victory was deafening. A silence built on thousands of deaths, millions of tons of fuel, and a single truth: industrial power had conquered distance. The post-war years turned the Mustang into legend. Airshows, museums, collectors, hundreds of P-51DS still fly today, their engines singing the same metallic song that once echoed over Tokyo. In contrast, only one Ki-84 Hayate survives in Japan. A relic in a quiet museum at Chiran, its paint flaking, its story nearly forgotten. The balance of survival tells its own truth. The machines built in plenty endured. Those born of desperation did not. The war in the air had been more than battles. It was a transformation of civilization itself. The P-51 Mustang symbolized an idea that human ingenuity, multiplied by mass production, could render even the mightiest empires helpless. No matter the courage of the pilot or the devotion of a nation, the mathematics of modern warfare were merciless. Technology, logistics, and numbers had become the new gods. In the end, the Mustang over Tokyo was more than a victory. It was prophecy. A single-engine fighter crossing 1,500 miles of ocean to strike the heart of an empire marked the beginning of the modern age, the era where no place on Earth could hide from human invention. The divine wind had been conquered by machinery, and the age of myth had ended in the roar of a supercharged engine. And as the engine's echo faded into history, one truth remained written in aluminum and sky: courage builds legends, but industry wins wars.